All right, Justin, you are definitely not my father, but I'm still excited to do this with you. YAA Electric, our first episode of Plugged In. How you doing, Justin?
Doing wonderful. Got my nice new electric ride. No longer running on that dinosaur juice. Everything is looking lovely at our household.
All right, so let's actually kick things off with that. And I mean, just to be fair, I do have my dad here in spirit.
Whoa, did you feel that jolt of electricity?
Couldn't help myself. Let's kick off with that, Justin. You just bought an EV. You literally just the other day you bought an Ioniq 5. What precipitated that? What's going on? Give us the whole backstory.
Yeah, the backstory. Oh, it's crazy. There's like multiple chapters to this backstory. So, why didn't I have an EV before? Well, I've loved electric vehicles since probably 2015, but they're expensive, and I wasn't willing to just go out and get the most affordable EV because I knew my family likes to travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And technology is accelerating at a lightning pace towards better batteries, better motors, better range. I was patient, basically. So here we are, 2022. How did I end up buying an Ioniq 5, especially in the limited trim, which is the hardest to find in all of North America? It was crazy. Let me say, not everyone has the patience that I had to do this. um, so going on to social media, I saw that people were saying basically it was the base trim of the Ioniq 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I'm not quite sure I want that. I really wanted at least the mid trim and preferably the limited trim, which is really hard to find. No one really knows why Hyundai is sending very few limited trims to the US, but they are.
Yeah.
So I went on a little wild goose chase to find this car. Now, let me back up just for a second. Why did I pick the Ioniq 5? Let me give you
Why did you?
the high level summary of that. So, the Ioniq 5, 256 miles of range, higher in the city, lower on the highway. But the game changer for me is how fast it charges. So
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at 20 minutes at a charger, and I can verify that. I've owned the car for about 4 days. I've already charged it at Electrify America, I think maybe 6 times. That's a lot in just 4 days.
That's
And
a lot in 4 days.
yeah, I've already got 1,000 miles on the vehicle, but I plan on keeping it for a long time. That was another thing that featured into my purchase is how long do I want to keep this vehicle? What's my ownership cycle going to be like? And what I ended up deciding with my wife is that we wanted to keep this vehicle for like 10 years. So that was another reason to not just settle for something that we barely liked. We
Question for
wanted
you: Does the new Ioniq 5 come with the typical Hyundai? I mean, Hyundai offers a 10-year powertrain warranty. Does it come with a 10-year powertrain warranty on the Ioniq 5?
Yes, sir, it does. 10 years or 100,000 miles for the full electric powertrain. And that was
That's
another thing
cool.
that drove me towards the Ioniq 5 because quite a few EVs out there, you can get a decent 8-year warranty, which is great, but I'll take those extra 2 years. And even though I put 1,000 miles on it in the first 4 days, I don't drive like that all the time. I'm mostly like a 15 to 20,000 miles a year type person. So
Yeah.
I think that warranty will come in handy. Another thing that I was looking at was what other EVs are out there on the market. And what I saw was that, yeah, Teslas are great, but they're expensive
Oh.
and they do not qualify for the 7,500 tax credit, the federal EV tax credit. That was a big game changer for me because do EVs need the tax credit? That's up for debate, but it's there and I'm going to take advantage of it because it's there. Other EVs I was looking at, since Tesla was kind of out of the question for me due to the tax credit, were the Volkswagen ID4. It's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty awesome EV. However, it doesn't charge nearly as fast. ID4 owners
Mm-hmm.
are going to be sitting there for about 40 minutes. I was sitting there for about 20 minutes. I was also considering the Kia EV6, but that's where it comes down to styling. I just think that the Ioniq 5 looks pretty cool. I don't know about
What about
you,
the
but
Mach-E?
the
Mach-E?
Mach-E, yeah, it's also just seeing severe additional dealer markups. It's very hard to find a Ford Mustang Mach-E for under 60,000. And
Wow.
even at that, you might be looking at lower trims for that model, where I was able to get the top trim for 56,000, and that's before
Wow.
any incentives. The incentives
Yeah.
definitely. And then
Let's
one last thing
let's
I'll say is 2 years of free charging.
Let's take a second to go to the chat, Justin. There's so many folks joining us, which is awesome to see. We've got Kimberly Klein in the house, which is great to hear. Someone from our team must be over on the YAA YouTube channel, so thanks for tuning in. We appreciate that. Learning fast. Let's see a picture of the new ride. I think we've got one. I can pull that up a little later on in today's show. John's here wishing us good luck, and he also has a question. How long do the batteries last? That's interesting because it's tied up with Hyundai's 10-year powertrain warranty. So it's kind of interesting what that question, entails.
Yeah, let's talk about John's question real quick. So, this is where I'm stepping into somewhat of an unknown and relying on what data we do have from the past 15 years of EV existence to try to extrapolate and give myself a little bit of comfort other than that 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. So, there are Teslas on the road today with over 200,000 miles on the odometer with the original battery and original electric motor. There are many of those. That is a Tesla. Hyundai and Kia, they've got their own thing going on with the eGMP platform. But we can try to infer and try to see that, well, these lithium-ion batteries, they may be, worth a decade of heavy use.
Mhm.
The other thing we can look at here is the vehicles that have had their batteries replaced. What is that process like?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be expensive. So if you need your battery replaced, you better hope you're under warranty. But considering that right now is 2022, according to my calendar, if we're looking at 10 years in the future, which I'm hoping I would not need a battery replaced in less than 10 years, we're going to be looking at the 2030s, and battery prices have been dropping like a rock over the past decade. So if that trend continues, hopefully it does, replacing a battery in the 2030s would be far more affordable outside of warranty than it would be today. Right today, it can cost $15,000 to get your battery replaced. That's a lot of money. I'm not okay
You
with
know,
that.
it kind of reminds me of, and we talk a lot about the chip shortage back on the Ray and Zach channel, on the YA, on every channel we talk about the chip shortage, and those are the semiconductors. And there's been a push. I forget what the law is, but it's like every set number of years you can fit more in circuits on the chip.
I
I
believe
forget
it's
Moore's law.
Murphy's
It's called
law.
Moore's
Moore's law.
Moore's law.
Okay.
I think it's Moore's law. That's what battery development sounds like. It's like every few years, we're going to be able to squeeze more juice out of a battery. It's going to become more efficient, more cost effective. And you're essentially, you're one of the early adopters. Like it's important to acknowledge that here. You weren't necessarily buying the first Tesla Roadster that came out in 2015,
Nope.
2014, whatever it was. But you're definitely an early adopter. And yeah, you're making a bet that technology will continue to develop because yeah, 15 grand to replace the powertrain. I mean, that sounds expensive.
Yeah, a lot of chemistry and physics are involved with the development of electric vehicles. And that Tesla Roadster example is actually worth talking about for a second. So we've got
Yeah.
in 2008, way back in 2008, the Tesla Roadster arrived for like maybe $150,000 and it could go about 100 miles. So today we're looking at various EVs at the base trim that are available for under 40,000 with incentives, in the 40s without incentives, that can go 300 miles on a charge. So we're already seeing that process happening. And where will it go from here? It's been so interesting to see what a lot of the talking heads and experts think about how battery development's going to go in the 2020s, because there's one camp that thinks everyone's going to kind of settle in around 250 miles of range because they need to kind of ration their batteries. The automakers do. They need to ration their batteries because there's not enough. They're trying to make as many EVs as they can. And they are going to basically get as many batteries as they need for that 250-mile range and then just kind of build more vehicles. The other camp thinks that, well, in 5 years' time, maybe EVs will be going 400 miles on a charge.
Yeah.
And then here's like the wild card. Charging infrastructure. Do you need a 400-mile range if you have like chargers in every town, every 10 miles, fast chargers that fill up your car in 10 to 15 to 20 minutes? Some would say no. I personally think you don't need a 400-mile range if you've got chargers everywhere. So there's a lot of focus on all of those aspects.
Which would be kind of interesting because the batteries are incredibly not only expensive, but also heavy. And so it'd be really interesting. One of the big challenges with a lot of EVs right now, I guess it's not an immediate challenge, but a long-term challenge, is the fact that they weigh so much in the wear and tear that they're going to cause on the roads. If everyone's driving essentially, not everyone's going to be driving a Hummer EV that weighs 9,000 pounds, but still, everyone's going to be driving a vehicle that weighs a ton. And if you can reduce the amount of battery that's required on board because there's more ample charging, plus you can get more out of a smaller battery, like you can see how that can all come together to make this more feasible down the line.
Yeah, and that's why automakers like Nissan, GM, and Ford are working on solid state batteries because they should be, in theory, a bit lighter. One of Nissan's executives just came out and said, we're working on solid state batteries that will be ready for production in 2028. That's 6 years away, but that's actually pretty fast considering that right now solid state just exists in the laboratory. So
Well,
bringing that
and
into
also
cars.
Justin, because everyone says their entire lineup's going to be EV by 2030. So I mean, you got to have it by 2028, or we're going to be kind of screwed here.
Yeah, Nissan has a really interesting trajectory on its own. They were the first mass producer of EVs in the world before Tesla. The Nissan Leaf, you've seen those bug-eyed, grasshopper-looking things creeping through the city streets. Yeah, those are Nissan Leafs with like 80 miles of range. So to see Nissan hopefully leading the charge forward, pun intended, all the way to solid-state batteries, the first production cars with solid-state batteries, that's kind of amazing. They're behind the game, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. All right, back to the chat here for a second, and then Justin, I'm the host slash director, and you got to call me out on these things. We didn't even do like introductions or what this show's about, so we're gonna press pause after going through the chat here. We're gonna let you know what YAA Electric's new show, Plugged In, is all about, what we're trying to do here, and also we want to hear some feedback from everyone that's with us. Give us some insights into what you want to hear, and also podcast is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, so feel free to search for YAA Electric and Plugged In there, and you'll be able to find it. We've got George K here with us. We appreciate that. Igor's here with us as well. And a question here, Justin, from Learning Fast: how many watts does the Ioniq 5 charge at?
230 kilowatts. So that's pretty fast. That's equivalent
really
to what
fast.
a Tesla can charge at.
That's my Model 3 behind me at my Malibu home. We've got Tyler here with another question. Did the history of Hyundai's build quality have any impact on your decision? It's a great question.
So I grew up with Hyundai being known as like a kind of mediocre brand in like 2000, 2005. It wasn't the best brand, but I watched as their quality kind of stepped up incrementally over time. And it was really checking out the Hyundai Sorento, Santa Fe, a few others that I was kind of just surprised by how nice their build quality was. That got me to consider their EVs a lot more. They've hired from, I think, BMW, various engineers and designers onto the Hyundai team in Korea, and that's kind of bumped up their production to a new level. So that was a part of my decision, is things are looking good. I will say, this is important. I know some of you out there might be considering a Tesla. Teslas are great, but they do have some build quality issues. Not every Tesla has big issues, but I'm not okay with paying $56,000 for rattling noises and weird paint jobs and things like that. I was thinking about how this legacy automaker better have their stuff together if, they've been in business for 50 years. So that was a part of my decision.
Let's come back to that point right there, which is build quality and kind of what the Ioniq 5 looks and feels like. I want to spend some time there, but let's press pause for just a second. What the heck are people? There's 23 people here with us right now, Justin. What are they watching? What are they tuning in for? This is YAA Electric. If you're new to the channel, you should definitely subscribe. If you're not familiar with YAA, toss that in the YouTube search. We help with auto advice, things going on in the car market. Pretty much anything auto we're trying to cover there. And Justin, I'm going to give you a brief introduction, and I want you to bring it up a notch. Justin Fischer is our in-house EV expert at YAA. So if you go to joinyaa.com, and if you go and read any of our articles on electric vehicles, Justin is the man behind that. He is an incredible researcher and an incredible writer, and we thought, why not get on the show together and do the Plugged In podcast? But Justin, go ahead, give yourself a little bit of an introduction, and then we can hop back to the chat. And also, I want to know more and more about the experience. What's it like being inside the Ioniq 5?
Yeah, so I'm an EV nerd with a scientific background. I actually was a biologist like 5 years ago. I was doing conservation biology work. And as a part of being trained as a biologist, you learn all about physics, chemistry, and things like that on the side. So that was kind of my first introduction to where science is headed and how it's going to be shaping mobility in the 21st century. I will admit, very openly admit, that EVs are what got me interested in the automotive industry. I was not like a traditional gearhead or whatever. I have never driven, fast cars on the track. It's really been experiences with EVs, people who bought a Tesla, people who bought a Nissan Leaf, getting a chance to take a ride in those cars. That's what got me interested in the EV space. I've always been a rider, though. I've been riding since I was, I don't know, like 16 years old. And
Wow.
my writing skills have just kind of shaped and followed the paths that I've taken in my career, from science to education to here we are in the automotive industry. So I really love covering sustainability topics too. So not just electric vehicles, but also the solar industry, wind energy. I think all of that is amazing. And we're going to talk a lot about batteries here at YAA Electric. Batteries are like the new oil. It's controversial, but that's kind of a point you could make. Batteries are the new oil. And
Hey man, it's your show. You can make all the controversial points you want.
yeah, hot takes. So we'll be talking a lot about that kind of stuff as we go on, and the way that the power grid is now relying on gigantic batteries the size of a school bus. That's just fascinating to me. So I've been interested in this type of technology and super excited to be working with YAA. I've been a part of the team for, I believe, maybe like 5 months now, 5 or 6 months.
Coming up on half a year. Yeah.
It's pretty
Now,
amazing.
Justin, I want to also mention we're also going to talk about on this show plugins, hybrids, things like that as well. And I just want to give you a moment here, the middle of today's show, because these are going to be about 30-minute shows, and again, the podcast download on. Sorry, that comment caught me. We're working on the green screen. These are going to be about 30-minute shows on the podcast when you download on Spotify and Apple. But Justin, I want to ask you, what do you hope someone who listens to Plugged In? It's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show, so 3 times a week to get your EV fix in. What do you hope someone takes away from the show that they can't get elsewhere? What are we going to do differently? What are we going to provide here?
Zach, you and I are going to make EVs approachable, because driving an EV is a whole nother ball game with its own learning curve. Anyone who says there's no learning curve, they're lying to you. Okay, it is different, and I think together we can kind of talk about the EV ownership experience, both in the technical terms if we want to go there, but also just in everyday conversation. What's it like to live with an EV? We can talk about the auto industry, because that's something I'm very interested in, and there's tons to talk about with investments and concept models, the latest updates. And we can also just talk about how you should care for your EV if you end up owning one, how YAA can be a part of that experience, and just the future, because the future is really bright with EVs.
And I would so I 100% agree, and I'd kind of like supplement that with, if you're thinking about, is an EV right for me? As you listen to this show over a few days or a few weeks, hopefully you'll get some insights there. If it is the right decision for you to make, and then if you do make that decision, what you could expect, just like you were saying, Justin. So excited that we're doing this. I think it's a great opportunity for us to branch out here at YAA and to give people the information they need. People are searching for this stuff, and there's a lot of great resources out there, but I think we can provide an interesting perspective, one that's really, like you said, approachable. And here you go. George K in the chat. Have owned an EV since 2017. Household is completely internal combustion engine free. That's an early adopter. That's pretty damn incredible.
I'm going to guess it's a Bolt, because it's 2017, and I think that was one of the higher selling models that year. Let us know if we're right, George.
Absolutely. All right, Justin, let's switch gears at least a little bit here. And I probably shouldn't use that phrase quite as much on this show as I do on the Ray and Zach channel. Let's talk a little bit about, let's kick things off actually with the Gigafactory in Texas. Then maybe we can talk about Mazda and some of the news there. Maybe we'll wrap today's show with VinFast and how they're coming to America. But yeah, let's kick things off with Giga Texas. It seems like every single day Tesla's coming out with some new headline news. What happened there?
Yeah, they've got a lot of capital expenditures, don't they? Well, they built a gigantic factory in Austin, Texas, that is supposed to be the key to lifting Tesla from somewhat of a automaker on the margins of the whole industry to being a truly mainstream automaker, because they're going to be cranking out hundreds of thousands of more Model Ys. I believe they said their goal is 500,000 Model Ys a year from that factory alone. That's just Model Ys. They also plan on building the Cybertruck at Giga Texas. Where's the Cybertruck? I don't know. I know
Okay.
Justice is looking for his. But
come on, man! Like, is it actually going to come? I mean, didn't they? Elon Musk say that like 2023. But how can you? That company, man, between all the delayed deadlines or missed deadlines, and then also, like, their CEO is just a little bit out there. He's just a little crazy. Like all the Twitter stuff over the weekend, it makes it hard for me to root for that company. I think what they're doing is great, but it's pretty nuts.
I blame it on the lack of sleep. I think Elon Musk probably sleeps about 3 hours a night. That's going to have some effects on his his whole performance. But no, I think they're doing a lot of amazing, innovative things. And how many successful startup car companies have there been in the past 50, 75 years? Like zero, besides Tesla now, I guess. I mean, we've got a bunch in the running right now. The EV space has made it quote unquote easier to dive right into the automotive industry head first. We've seen that with Rivian, Lucid, so many others, VinFast. But Tesla has achieved a lot. They are controversial. They are their own animal, to say. But they have reached mass production of EVs starting from scratch. That's something to be congratulated on. But they do make a lot of promises, and they often break those promises. And what amazes me is how much forgiveness they get from early deposit placers, people who've got reservations down on a vehicle. They seem to get a lot of forgiveness that other automakers probably would not have. And we saw that recently with Rivian.
Yeah, Rivian's the perfect example there. I got a question here from Igor. Is it similar? Is it a similar gigafactory to the one that they just opened in Germany?
Yes. Now, interesting thing, the one in Germany started construction long ago, like maybe 2 to 3 years ago. And it's really been the red tape, the process of applying for all the paperwork in Germany that has delayed Giga Berlin. That's what they call it. And
Wow.
Giga Berlin, the purpose of that factory is also going to be to build the Model Y. That's really the vehicle that Tesla is banking on to drive their growth. They want to be selling millions of Model Ys. So there are animations that they have on Tesla.com where they show like full self-driving, and it's an animation with a bunch of Model Ys driving around each other. That is kind of what they want the future to actually be, is everyone driving a Model Y.
We are definitely going to spend an entire day just talking about Tesla, because there's the FSD beta that's going on right now, and we could talk about that for hours. I mean, you and me could like grab a beer, sit here, and just talk about that for hours. Price increases, I mean, just wow. We could just talk about the data there. Not even, I mean, not saying it's good or bad, but just like, wow, the prices have gone up considerably. And then future and upcoming models, like what they're doing potentially doing in the semi industry is super interesting. There's a lot of Tesla talk that I'm sure will happen over the next couple of months here. We have here in the chat, though, I want to toss this in from Mel. I have a Hyundai Kona Electric on reserve. What are your thoughts on the Kona Electric?
It's very underrated. I'm a big fan of the Kona Electric. Maybe that might be a hot take, but let me tell you why I think the Kona Electric is very underrated. It has pretty solid range, I believe around 235, 240 miles, but it's really affordable. So we're talking like maybe $34,000, which I know some people say, what EVs are $20,000? There's none, and there's not going to be any. But the Kona Electric is about the same price as the Chevy Bolt, but without the, flammable stigma. So I'm a big fan of that, and it still qualifies for the federal tax credit. So if you go with the Kona Electric, you can get that tax credit.
And we have, I should mention, if you just Google search YAA EV tax credits, we have an article that Justin's maintained back on our website that lists out all the different vehicles that are still eligible for tax credits. And we're keeping our pulse on the news of, will there be new tax credits here in 2022? You'll hear that here. You'll hear that here first. Let's talk about Mazda just briefly, Justin, then go back to the chat, and then believe it or not, that'll be episode number 1 in the books. But lots of headlines out of Mazda over the weekend for their EV push. What did you see there?
Yeah, so Mazda's been trying to figure out a way to bring up their US market share, or North American market share as a whole. And some of the latest news out shows that they're going to be banking on an expanded electrified presence to do that. They're having a unique approach. So rather than diving into EVs like we've seen Hyundai and Kia do, they are relying heavily on plug-in hybrids. And I'm a big fan of plug-ins, because another one of my odd opinions is that not everyone should buy an EV, whereas a lot of the EV nerds like myself, you'll find out there, they want everyone to buy an EV. Well, a plug-in can be a great best of both worlds situation for some people. And Mazda has really gone down that route. And some of the news out today shows that they're going to be increasing their EV sales by somewhere around 30% in the next 5 years. That may not sound like as a lot, especially compared to what we hear from some of the American legacy automakers like Ford and GM. However, consider that right now, Mazda only has one EV, and it's a bad EV. Do not go buy the Mazda MX-30. All of you out there listening, Don't buy it. You know how far you can go with the Mazda MX-30? A 2022 model, by the way. Guess for me, Zach.
My
It's a
dad's 70.
2022 model. It's brand
My
new.
dad is 71 years old. If it is below 71, I'm guessing. Oh no, is he 70? His birthday's in May. He's 70. It gets 71 miles on the battery.
100, right around 100.
Hey, that was.
But
perfect
if you're
guess.
paying about like I think $38,000 for that car, oh by the way, it's 100 miles of range and it charges very slow. So what are you going to do with it?
Probably
don't
not
know.
buy it.
So Mazda does seem to have higher ambitions. They've got some goals that they're working towards in the rest of this decade, and we'll see where it takes them from there.
You know, and it's super interesting. Mazda and Subaru is the other one that comes to mind. Have like not done too much yet. I mean, the Solterra is coming out soon, I guess. But Mazda and Subaru, two brands that are pretty much beloved by their owners, have Subaru more than Mazda, a bit of like a cult-like following. Haven't really moved and played in the EV space. It's been interesting to watch others take advantage of that.
Yeah, and throughout this podcast, throughout the time, we'll probably hear me refer to Subaru quite a bit because my wife is a Subaru Forester owner, and there's a lot of interesting comparisons to make between the EV lifestyle and owning a Forester.
Definitely. All right. Now, Justin, I'm going to kick you off for just 1 second. I want to share my screen and show you in your car. And also want to mention that Justin, just like you, he left a dealer review back on the Join YAA website. So super encourage you to do that. So here's Justin and his brand new Ioniq 5. Picked it up on a rainy day from Hyundai 112. If you go to joinyaa.com/reviews, it'll take you right here to our results. I'm going to just show you, we updated this. And also I'm going to do a quick refresh. Are we at 1,000 reviews? No, we're still at 999. I'm going to add 112 in my search. I've got Hyundai 112. And you can see, Justin said 10 out of 10. He is likely to recommend this dealership to a friend. They sold the car at MSRP. No accessories or protection packages. You can see even when he purchased the vehicle. And we've also now got comments. So you can enter comments on a particular review if you had a similar or dissimilar experience to someone who left a review. And last but not least, I'll even show you this. You can sort by dealerships that are in California that YAA community members would recommend to a friend. There you go. There's 31 of them. Click on it and you can view what the YAA community has to share. Justin, let me pull you back in here. Sorry for all that chit chat on my own. But there you go. You left a great review for Hyundai 112, and it's awesome to see that good car deals can still come out of this environment we're in.
Yeah, and I think Wednesday we're going to talk quite a bit about my buying experience because let me say, it just was not what I expected. I'll leave it at that for now.
That's a pretty good foreshadow. All right. I think we'll do one more comment here from the chat, one more question here from the chat, and then we'll call it a show. Congrats, Justin. Show number 1 almost in the books. I think you've done a damn good job. Let us know in the chat. Has Justin done a good job on his first ever live stream? We've got from Igor here. Is it true that in Europe, the laws for self-driving are much more loose than they are here in North America? What do you know about that?
Generally, yes, surprisingly, because we often think of Europe as having stricter regulations. Well, actually, in Germany specifically, Mercedes has been able to drive self-driving S-Class and EQS vehicles below 40 miles an hour because of those loose regulations.
Now, another question for you. Did you see that video of a Cruise, one of the Cruise autonomous vehicles over the weekend getting pulled over by the police in California?
Yeah, that's an interesting situation because I'm of the belief that we are actually like a solid decade away from that becoming somewhat common. So yeah, that's like the future right there.
Maybe we need our own really you got to be kidding me segment here on YAA Electric. John wants to know, will Ray ever be joining us over here? Absolutely. We're going to have
sure
him
hope
cameo
so.
from time to time. And if you miss Papa Shefska, we'll be going live in 31 minutes back on the Ray and Zach channel. We have the Black Book team joining us, Justin. Hopefully you'll be able to tune in for that. They sent us over the data in advance. This used car market's pretty crazy.
Wow, and yeah, sometime we'll have to talk about how I sold my Nissan Altima to buy this Ioniq 5.
Absolutely. Well, here you go from George K. Great first stream. We appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Justin, I'll let the last word come from your end. Kudos to you. Congratulations on this.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And in the future, just know that we'll be talking about all things EVs from like, what is an EV? How does it work? To How many kilowatts of power does the Kia EV6 take? All those different topics and everything in between. We're going to go there. And I especially look forward to your questions. Feel free to email me at justin@joinyaa.com with your questions that you might want to have us talk about on the show. That's something I really want to focus on in the future, is answering your questions.
See you guys on Wednesday. Thanks, Justin.
Peace.